I installed the Dashcam to find out who scratched the Subaru. Instead, I found out my wife already had a husband. My name is Kieran Walsh, 32 years old, project manager for a mid-size commercial construction firm out of Columbus, Ohio. 5 years married to Nadine, who I met at a friend's backyard birthday party in the summer of 2019 when she spilled a margarita on my sleeve, apologized in the most genuine, embarrassed way I'd ever seen a stranger apologize, and then made it up to me by buying the next 3 rounds. She had dark hair she kept in a loose bun when she was working. She laughed at her own jokes a half-second before the punchline. She remembered exactly how everyone took their coffee, and she never made it seem like she was keeping track. We bought a house in Clintonville in 2022, a craftsman bungalow on a street with old maples that turned gold in October. We argued gently about getting a dog. We got a dog, a beagle named Penelope, who had strong opinions about mealtimes and no opinions whatsoever about anything else. Nadine worked from home as a remote financial consultant. Her client base was small and private, she explained early on, high net worth individuals, people who required discretion. She took that seriously. I respected that. She earned well. Our joint accounts were healthy. I never pressed her on the specifics of her work the same way. I never pressed her on the specifics of her childhood in Portland, which she described in the way people describe places they've genuinely left behind, warmly, briefly, without much detail. I didn't find that strange. I found it familiar. Some people hold their past loosely. I thought I understood that about her. The Subaru got keyed on a Thursday afternoon outside the Kroger on Henderson Road. I didn't notice until Saturday morning. A long diagonal scratch from the rear wheel, well to the passenger door. Deliberate enough that I stood there in the driveway for a minute, just looking at it, trying to understand what kind of person does that to a stranger's car. Nadine was in Cleveland for the weekend, visiting a college friend. I took photos, filed an insurance report, and spent the rest of the morning on YouTube learning how to install a Dashcam with parking mode motion detection. 2 hours later, the camera was mounted flush against the inside of the windshield, synced to an app on my phone, and set to capture any motion within 20 feet of the car while it was parked. It would also log GPS coordinates for every trip. I told myself I would email Nadine about it when she got home. Mention it over dinner. It was a 12-minute installation, not a secret. I forgot to mention it. She got home Sunday evening. Penelope lost her mind with joy. We had leftover soup and watched something, and the Dashcam sat in the corner of the windshield, doing its job quietly while I did mine. 3 weeks passed. Then on a Tuesday in mid-November, I was at my desk reviewing subcontractor bids when a notification came through on my phone. Motion detected, parking mode triggered. I assumed someone had bumped the car in the office garage. It had happened once before, and I opened the app to check the clip. The footage wasn't from the office garage. It was our street, our driveway. The timestamp read 10:47 a.m., Nadine pulling the car out, which she did sometimes for errands. That alone was unremarkable. I almost closed the app. But then I scrolled back through the archived GPS logs and saw something I hadn't gone looking for. A pattern. Over the past 3 weeks, Nadine had driven to the same address 12 separate times while I was at work. The same GPS coordinates, logged clean and consistent, like a commute. Not a grocery store. Not a friend's house. Not anywhere she had ever mentioned. I put the address into Google Maps at my desk. Quietly, the way you do when you're not ready to react to whatever you might find. A commercial strip on the north side of Columbus. A UPS store. A nail salon. A place called Meridian Document Services. A notary and document preparation office. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I stood up, walked to the stairwell, and called my friend Bowen. Bowen Steele and I had met junior year of college, as randomly assigned lab partners, in a statistics class we both approached, with approximately equal amounts of overconfidence and unpreparedness. We had barely passed. We had been close since. He'd spent the years since building a private investigation, an asset tracing firm out of German Village, the kind of work that suited someone who was patient, methodical, and deeply unbothered by what he found. I had referred a client to him once, a business dispute. I had done it without ever once, thinking that I would be the one calling him someday, from a stairwell, keeping my voice below office range. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. "How well do you know her financials?" he said, when I finished. "Joint checking and savings. We file taxes together. She has a separate business account for consulting invoices. Have you ever seen the statements on that business account?" I thought about it. I had not. "Don't go home early," Bowen said. "Don't change anything. Don't let on that you're aware of any of this. Can you do that?" I told him I could. I drove home that evening and sat across the dinner table from Nadine while she told me about a difficult client call and a thing Penelope had done with a sock, and I said the right things at the right times and kept my face exactly where it needed to be. I had not known, until that evening, that I was capable of that. Bowen called me the next afternoon. "The Document Services Office has processed 12 notarized instruments over the past 6 weeks, he said. "I don't have the full contents yet, but the business name associated with those filings is Greer Capital Management, LLC, registered in Nevada 14 months ago. I've never heard of it. The registered agent is a man named Ryland Greer." He paused. "I'm still building his profile, but I need to ask you something first. You mentioned your grandmother passed recently. When did the estate settle?" I felt it before I understood it. The way a specific piece of information lands in your chest a moment before your brain has finished processing it. "About 5 months ago," I said. "Everything transferred into a trust she'd set up for me. I'm the sole beneficiary." "Who holds it?" I told him. And then, with my other hand, I pulled up the trust account on my phone, for the first time since the transfer had finalized. I had checked it maybe twice. It felt like counting something that had cost me someone I loved, so I'd left it alone and let it sit. I opened the transaction history. There had been 6 outgoing wire transfers over the previous 4 months. The smallest was $9,000. The largest was $41,000. Combined, they totaled $162,000. Each transfer had been authorized using a power of attorney document I had never signed. I texted Bowen the numbers. His response came back in 80 seconds, "On it." I drove home on autopilot. Nadine was on a call in her office, door half closed, voice professional, and steady through the gap. I changed out of my work clothes. I took Penelope around the block and stood on the sidewalk in the November cold, watching the dog sniff a fire hydrant, and worked very carefully through everything I had been given. A document office, 12 visits, a Nevada LLC, a power of attorney I had never signed, $162,000 from a trust my grandmother had built across 4 decades of careful, modest living. My phone buzzed. "Nadine, just finishing up. There's pasta on the stove. Love you." I read that message 3 times. She was sending me a pasta emoji, while the evidence of whatever she had spent the past 6 weeks constructing sat notarized and filed at a strip mall on the north side of Columbus. I typed back, "Perfect, I'm starving." Then I walked inside and ate the pasta at the kitchen table while she wrapped up her call, and we watched television, and she fell asleep on the couch with her feet tucked under the dog, and I sat next to her and did not move for a long time. Bowen met me at his office at 7 the next morning, before she was awake. He had the laptop open and printed pages on the desk, and the expression of someone whose findings had grown more complicated than initially expected. "Ryland Greer," he said, "is 40 years old, relocated to Reno, Nevada in 2016. Licensed notary in the state of Nevada since 2017. He operates, or has operated, a financial document preparation business using his notary credentials to authenticate instruments prepared for clients." He turned the laptop toward me. A professional headshot pulled from somewhere I didn't recognize. A man I had never seen. Square jaw, dark hair going gray at the temples, a neutral smile. What's his connection to Nadine? Bowen was quiet for exactly 1 second too long. "They share a residence," he said. "An apartment in Reno. The lease originated in 2016. He kept his voice even. The current lease was updated 8 months ago. It lists 2 tenants, Ryland Greer and Nadine Greer. Nadine Greer. My wife's last name was Walsh, taken when we married. Her maiden name, on every document I had ever seen, was Ingram. Greer is a married name, I said. I pulled the Clark County marriage record this morning. He set a single printed page on the desk between us, facing me. Ryland Greer and Nadine Ingram. Married March 14, 2015. I looked at the page. There is no divorce record. Not limited records. Not records that required further inquiry. He had searched Clark County, Washoe County, and run a national dissolution index. No petition filed. No final decree. No proceeding of any kind. I had married a woman in 2020 who was already legally married to someone else. Our marriage, the ceremony, the license, the certificate I had kept in the file cabinet in the upstairs office, the 5 years of a shared life that I had believed in completely, had no legal existence. It was paperwork without a foundation, a structure built on something that was never there. Bowen said it plainly because he understood that imprecision wasn't kindness. She positioned herself to access your trust. A trust held in your name alone requires a power of attorney for anyone else to authorize transfers. She spent months at Meridian building that paper trail. She forged your signature on a POA. Greer used his legitimate notary credential to authenticate forged documents. That's the mechanism they've apparently been using across multiple targets. How many targets? We've identified 3 others so far. Men in similar situations, recent inheritances, individual accounts, trusts. The amounts ranged from $80,000 to $460,000. I sat with that number. $460,000. Someone's inheritance, someone's careful grandmother, someone's sitting somewhere not yet knowing. I asked Bowen, who we called. He was already reaching for his phone. Because the wire transfers crossed state lines, and the forged instruments involved federal financial systems, jurisdiction belonged to the FBI field office in Cincinnati. Bowen had a working relationship with a special agent, named Reardon, from prior asset fraud cases. He dialed her directly and put the call on speaker. I talked for 9 minutes. I delivered the information the way I had learned to, in the past 2 days, clearly, without ornament, without letting my voice drift into the register, where it would be obvious what it was costing me to say any of this out loud. Agent Reardon did not interrupt. When I finished, she asked Bowen to send everything to a secure address. The Dashcam GPS logs, the trust account statements, the Meridian filing records, the Nevada marriage certificate, the Reno lease, Bowen's full workup on Ryland Greer. Do not confront her, Reardon said. Do not change your behavior in any way that would signal awareness. I know what I'm asking. Can you hold that for a little longer? I had already held it for 3 days. I told her I could manage. What followed was 13 days that I can only describe as the most precisely disorienting period of my life. I came home every evening. We made dinner. We watched television. We took Panay on her evening walk through the neighborhood, down to the park at the end of the block and back. Nadine, talking about whatever she'd been reading or thinking about. Me responding in the correct places, with the correct weight. She was good at being present. She had always been good at it. I understood now that this was a practiced skill, not an innate warmth. That the quality I had loved most about her, the fullness of her attention, the sense that you were the only thing she was thinking about in any given moment, was a tool she had learned to use the way a craftsman learns to use a tool, automatically, without effort, in service of a result you couldn't see. On the 10th day she brought up, very casually, over Saturday morning coffee, a joint investment account she had mentioned once before. She had a financial contact who was producing excellent returns for a small group of clients. She could set up a call if I was interested, she said. She poured cream into her mug. Penelope was asleep on the rug between us. I said I'd think about it. I excused myself, went to the downstairs bathroom, and sat on the edge of the tub for 4 minutes doing the specific breathing you do when you understand with total clarity what you just heard, and what it means, and how close to the edge of the thing you're still standing. Then, I went back out and refilled her coffee without being asked because she had always refilled mine, and I knew she would notice if I didn't. On the 13th day, Agent Reardon called at 2:09 in the afternoon. "We're moving today. Stay at your office." I sat at my desk from 2:09 until 5:17, watching the second hand on the clock on the far wall. Then my phone rang. "We have her." They had found Nadine at a copy and shipping center on High Street, scanning and transmitting the documents for what would have been the 7th wire transfer from the trust account. Ryland Greer was picked up simultaneously at the Reno apartment by the FBI field office there. The forged power of attorney had been prepared using templates Greer had developed and refined across multiple prior operations. His notary credential, legitimate in the state of Nevada, was the mechanism that gave the forged documents their surface authenticity. The Dashcam GPS record, logging 12 consecutive trips to Meridian Document Services, gave the FBI the direct evidentiary link between Nadine and the document preparation chain they had been trying to close for 18 months. The second victim had reported his loss. The third had reported after him. But the connection between the document network and the individual women executing the scheme had remained out of reach until 12 GPS coordinates on a dashcam I installed to catch a parking lot vandal gave them exactly what they needed. I was not on High Street. Reardon had told me plainly not to be, and I had understood that instruction as something beyond procedural courtesy. I sat in the parking garage next to my office and waited. When the call came, I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and didn't pick it up again for a while. Penelope was at home alone. That was the first concrete thought I had after I put the phone down. I needed to get home to the dog. I drove home to an empty house. Penelope was confused in the way dogs get confused by absences. She moved from room to room, checking. I sat on the couch and she climbed into my lap, even though she was 30 pounds and had never been a lap dog, and I let her stay there until the room got dark. The trial was 8 months later. Nadine Margolis, that was her legal name, the name she'd been born with in Tucson, Arizona in 1986. Not Portland, Oregon, not with the background she had described, not with the degree she had referenced during our first year together. Sat at the defendant's table and listened to the federal charges read in full. Forgery of financial instruments, identity fraud, conspiracy, bigamy. Bigamy. The legal system's most clinical word for what it actually was. She had married me without ever being free to. She looked at me once across the courtroom, just once, somewhere in the second day. The expression on her face was composed, attentive, the same quality of attention I had always believed was care, the thing that had made me feel, across 5 years, like I was genuinely seen by the person I loved. I recognized it for what it was finally, not feeling. Assessment. The quiet ongoing calculation of a person, determining whether you are still useful. Nadine Margolis received 12 years. Ryland Greer received 9. 3 of the 4 other identified victims recovered significant portions of their losses through asset forfeiture proceedings. I recovered $149,000 of the $162,000. The remaining balance had moved through layered accounts that the forensic team was unable to fully unwind before the assets dissipated. The forged power of attorney was voided, the trust account was secured and re-registered. The marriage, legally, had never been a marriage. I went to the county clerk's office on a Tuesday in March and made that formal. A woman behind a counter handed me a form. I filled it out in blue pen. She pressed a notary seal into the paper and slid it back across the counter. I thought about Meridian Document Services when she did it. About how a notary stamp is supposed to mean something, is supposed to represent verification, a witness, a guarantee that the person signing is who they say they are. About how Ryland Greer had held a legitimate credential and used it to authenticate false things. About how authenticity and the appearance of authenticity are sometimes indistinguishable from the outside, and how the only way to know the difference is to look underneath, which is something most people do not do for the people they love. I don't think that's a failure. I think that's just what love is. You extend belief because the alternative is to hold everyone at a distance that makes genuine connection impossible. The cost of being open is that occasionally someone walks through the door who should not have been let in. The dashcam is still in the windshield. Penelope sometimes sits in the passenger seat, with her nose pressed against the glass, watching the street go by, and her breath fogs the lower corner of the camera's view. I've thought about moving it, but I haven't. It sits there doing its job, recording what's in front of it without judgment, without interpretation, without any interest in what the footage turns out to mean. I think about the scratch on the Subaru sometimes. I never did find out who did it. I never followed up on the original reason I installed the camera. The thing I was actually looking for went completely unsolved, and the thing the camera found instead changed everything. I've decided that's not irony. I think that's just how discovery works. You go looking for one thing, and if you're paying any attention at all, you end up finding the thing that was actually there.